As much as it's all sunshines and rainbows over at our main channel, traveling full-time can be super stressful when things don't go according to plan. So here's some of our biggest travel fails so you can avoid them and not make the same mistakes we did. One of the biggest mistakes we made when we first started traveling was the fact that we're Australians. We're very lucky in Australia that everything is safe, everything's secure, there's no corruption, the water's safe, and it's just a good country to be in. But when we started traveling, we realized that we couldn't go into Southeast Asia with that mentality. And one of the best examples we have of this is accommodation, especially Airbnbs. So one of the biggest mistakes we made at the start was trusting things like Airbnb in the pictures and taking it all on face value. There's been some times where we've gone to Airbnb accommodations and it's nothing like the pictures. You know, looking at pictures and going, oh, this looks nice, but it's a picture when the Airbnb was first started and it looks a lot worse now. And just taking things on face value and not trusting our gut. So what we should have done instead is looked at the photos and potentially read the reviews, read the feedback that people have been giving on the place instead of just taking the photos on face value and going, oh, she'll be right, we'll work it out. And this goes for food, this goes for tours, it just goes for everything. The chance of risk versus reward is way too high for risk. So that's one of the biggest mistakes we made at the start, was the fact that we were just too trusting. Fast forward a year and we're a lot more cynical. When we go to the Airbnb website, we look at the photos, we read the reviews, we really hone in and we really read between the lines of everything we're doing. Another mistake that we made really early in the piece is we were planning way too far ahead. I tell people when you're about to go on a massive trip, you get into this nesting phase, the same way a pregnant woman in the last trimester of her pregnancy will start to nest at home. They'll start to buy the cot and the pram and things like that. You start to do the same thing when you're traveling. So before we left on our trip, we were trying to plan as far ahead as we could because we were excited. But we found as soon as we got to Malaysia, which was our first stop, we were about 2 weeks into our planned adventure and we had to change it completely because schooling was an issue. Some things had closed down after COVID. And then we realized that we couldn't do everything that we wanted to do. So now we just plan like a week or two ahead, or we'll just plan we're going to be in the country from this time to this time. And then everything in the middle, we just plan when we get on the ground. That includes accommodation. So generally we'll book our accommodation maybe 2 weeks ahead of time. And yes, we may pay slightly more, but it stops that booking from getting taken out from underneath you. Sometimes we've landed in the country, just stayed at a hotel and booked there and then. But booking too far ahead was definitely a mistake that we made. And now fast forward a year, we maybe book the place we're going to stay for a month or 2 months or 3 months. And then everything we do inside, we just book like a week ahead of time. That's kind of what we do now. The next mistake that we made is assuming that our kids will travel as aggressively as we do. And what I mean by that is kids don't have the stamina that adults do. They can't do back-to-back trips. They can't do back-to-back excursions. They can't just constantly be shifting and moving things. They get tired. Their legs are small. So when we first started, we tried to book out as far as we could in advance because we were excited to go on this trip. And then we got on the ground and 2 weeks later, we were slowing right down because the kids just couldn't keep up with the pace. Now we try and book 1 or 2 things to do in a week. We don't try and book back to back stuff because it's exhausting for the kids. And to be fair, it's exhausting for the parents too. That means that we're traveling a lot slower now. It allows the boys to settle back into their school routine when we hit the ground, and then we can start to do activities. So I find that's a lot better way to go about it than trying to just smash everything into a week and then move on to the next place. And the next thing isn't necessarily a mistake. It's more of a travel fail. We get suckered right into those Instagram worthy spots. And because of that, we got caught up in a lot of tourist traps, especially when we started traveling. And I call this a fail. It's not necessarily a mistake because some people really like traveling like that. But we really wanted to travel to countries and experience the country for what it is. We didn't want to see a manicured, perfect version of that country. We wanted to see what the locals see. We wanted to see local sites and we wanted to get off the beaten track. Because honestly, if we wanted to just hang around with other foreigners, we would have stayed in Australia. We come to these countries to experience the local culture and experience the local sites. We found at the very start, we were going, oh, we got to go here because it looks awesome. We got to go here because someone's reviewed it. And then we get there and there's thousands of tourists at the places. Some of the best places we've visited have just been asking locals, because generally when you go to a place, the locals actually know the best places to go. So that's definitely a fail we made at the start, is trying to go to all the tourist destinations when really we should have just stuck to our gut and gone, the reason we're traveling is we're trying to experience culture for an experience, local insights, and try and get off the beaten track. Since we started doing that more and focusing on Instagram less, it's been an amazing experience, and we've been able to uncover some really awesome experiences. I know a lot of people like those tourism destinations and really like those Instagram worthy spots, but we really experienced this in the Philippines specifically when we went to some of the waterfalls. They were just trashed. Yes, they were amazing spots, but there was rubbish everywhere because so many tourists had gone to those places. You can't blame the locals for monetizing what they have, but because of that, it's just a really uncomfortable experience where literally if you just ride down the road for 500 meters, you go to a waterfall that's just as nice and just as beautiful, that's got like 2 people there and it's just a couple local kids playing at it. So generally, you don't necessarily have to not go to the Instagram worthy spots. You just got to find the local replacement for them. There's nothing better than just walking to a waterfall, looking up, looking around and seeing like 3 people there and going, this is a magical experience because I'm experiencing it with my family and with my family only. So it's not just us as parents that's made some mistakes. Obviously, it's been a big adjustment for all of us traveling full time, and the boys are no exception to this. They've made their fair share of mistakes too. Now, boys will be boys, but there's been a couple of big ones that I just want to share. It's all part of the learning experience. So this is a little bit more fun. It just made for some amazing stories. That's the thing. Every bad experience when you're traveling makes for an amazing story. And one of those was when we were in Kuala Lumpur. We basically are trying to teach our boys to be responsible for their own stuff and responsible as a family unit. So one thing we get the boys to do is when we're about to leave a place, we get them to look for stuff. Even though my wife and I, we do a pretty good job of looking, we get them to look under couches, we get them to look under sheets. We just get them to have a good look to make them responsible for part of the traveling experience. We have this thing called a Go Local, which is this little dongle that allows you to use the internet. We had this thing, it's $700, and we needed it out because we were going to a place that didn't have internet. So we had it out, and I said to the boys, make sure one of you guys grabs this. Unbeknownst to me, my wife had put the sheet over the top of it. Anyway, we get to the train station and we need the internet, and my wife is like, where's the Go Local? And my heart just sank because I looked at Liam and Riley and they were in panic mode. They realized they didn't pick it up. We had 30 minutes until we boarded. It was 15 minutes back to the hotel. My wife said, okay, I'm going to run up to the hotel room, grab it, come back. If I don't make it on the train, I'm going to have to look and try and catch the next train. You guys will have to get on this train without me because you can't just wait in the train station. So anyway, Pauline runs over and she's off. I was explaining to the boys, this is the consequences of your actions. If you don't take responsibility for the things you're responsible for, then other people have to pick up the slack. So anyway, the train starts to board. We get on the train. Boys get seated. They're panicking at this point because they think we're going to leave mum behind. The train has like 2 minutes till it leaves, and I figured, okay, well, if I stand in the doors, then it won't be able to close on me. They won't be able to leave. I might be able to buy Pauline a couple of minutes. So I go over to the door and I just stand in the door. Train's supposed to leave. The door's closing on me. And I'm like, I can do this until they come over and tell me to stop. So the train conductor started to walk over and he's yelling at me to get out of the door. And as he got to me, Pauline comes running down the stairs, waving at me. So as she comes over, I let her in. The door's closed and we're out. So I managed to delay the train for 3 minutes. But this just shows that sometimes the mistakes make for good stories. The boys learn a valuable lesson. They have never left anything behind since. So there's always positives to negatives. And honestly, the boys haven't had many mistakes. You know, just what kids do. Kids will be kids. We did have a pretty scary fail. I've got a whole video on that specific fail right up here on what happened on the day. But long story short, we got escorted by the police in Malaysia. Essentially what happened was we hired a car. We were in Ipoh and we were heading up to a place called the Cameron Highlands, which is this really cool place in the mountains. About 40 kilometers into the road trip, there was a police checkpoint. They pulled us over and the officer was like, you were speeding, which clearly we weren't because we were stuck behind a truck. But I figured, okay, they're angling for a bribe. I can talk my way around this. Anyway, as I was talking to the policeman, he walks around the car and his whole demeanor changed completely. He went from being a friendly police officer to really angry. Comes over and goes, your car's out of registration. You need to leave it here. You need to walk. Getting really aggressive. And at this point, I'm panicking because I had no idea what he was talking about. The car was from a hire company. It should be registered. So the policeman's like, you have to walk. And I was like, well, we can't walk. We're 40 kilometers. I've got my kids here. What can we do? He goes, you pay bribe. You pay bribe. Okay. How much? 300 ringgit, which is about $100 Australian. So we pay the bribe. My family is shaken up. I'm shaken up. Anyway, get in contact with SOCAR, explained that it was their fault that we got shaken down for a bribe. They were good about it, to be fair. They actually gave us the money back and really apologized, and then gave us a script to give to them if they pull us up on the way back, because it was registered. They just hadn't changed the sticker. With all that said, our journey has been pretty smooth sailing overall. Southeast Asia has been a delight to explore and has so much to offer when you go looking for it. If you're still worried about tackling tackling full-time travel with your kids, then you should really check out this video here talking about how we handled the risks with our family. As always, guys, make sure to stay safe on the road, and we'll catch you all on the horizon.